In a small research station hidden deep in the frozen wilderness of Alaska, two scientists worked tirelessly against the biting cold. William, a tall man with sharp eyes and a quiet demeanor, focused on adjusting the equipment while Laura, his partner, leaned over a microscope. The air inside the station was tense, but filled with anticipation. They had been searching for something extraordinary, and today they believed they had found it. The discovery came from an ice core drilled weeks earlier, buried deep beneath layers of ancient frost. Trapped within bubbles of frozen water was a tiny organism unlike anything they had ever seen. Under the lens of the microscope, it pulsed faintly, almost as if it were alive despite being locked away for thousands of years. Laura adjusted the focus and gasped softly. "William," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you need to see this." He moved quickly, leaning over her shoulder to peer at the sample. What he saw made his heart race. The organism wasn't just unusual, it was alien. Its structure defied everything they knew about biology. It looked like a virus, but its behavior suggested intelligence. Instead of lying dormant, it seemed to react to stimuli, shifting and rearranging itself under the light of the microscope. This could change everything," William murmured, his breath fogging up the glass surface. He straightened up, running a hand through his graying hair. "If we're right about what this thing can do, it might rewrite the rules of life itself." Laura nodded, though worry lingered in her expression. "We don't even know what it is yet. For all we know, it could be dangerous. Dangerous or not, we can't ignore it," William replied firmly. "Think about the possibilities. If we can harness whatever this thing does, we could cure diseases, extend lifespans, maybe even alter evolution itself." Over the next few days, they carefully extracted more samples from the ice core and began running tests. The organism, which they named Erebus 7 after the dark mysteries of the underworld in mythology, showed incredible adaptability. When introduced to simple cells in Petri dishes, it didn't destroy them. Instead, it integrated into their DNA, rewriting genetic codes in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Plants exposed to Erebus 7 grew faster and stronger. Microscopic organisms developed traits never seen before. But there was one test result that left both scientists uneasy. When Erebus 7 was introduced to human tissue cultures, it behaved differently. Instead of attacking or destroying the cells, it blended seamlessly with them. There were no immediate signs of harm, but the implications were unsettling. Was it lying dormant, or was it doing something far more complex? As they packed up samples to send back to their lab in Colorado, neither William nor Laura could shake the feeling that they were playing with forces beyond their understanding. Outside, the wind howled across the icy landscape, carrying with it an eerie silence. Deep down, they wondered if releasing Erebus 7 into the world was a gift or a curse. Only time would tell. At the research lab in Colorado, Jacob and Maria were excited to receive the samples from Alaska. The package arrived late at night, but neither of them minded staying up to begin their work. They had read William and Laura's notes about Erebus 7, and the possibilities seemed endless. As they unpacked the vials containing the mysterious organism, they couldn't help but feel a mix of curiosity and unease. The first step was to replicate the tests conducted in Alaska. Jacob, a meticulous scientist with a calm demeanor, prepared several Petri dishes filled with various organisms, plants, insects, and small mammals. Maria, who had a knack for spotting patterns, carefully observed each reaction as they introduced Erebus 7 to the samples. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but within hours, changes began to occur. The plants were the first to show signs of transformation. A simple fern grew rapidly, its leaves expanding to twice their normal size. By morning, it had developed strange, glowing veins that pulsed faintly under the lab lights. "This isn't just growth," Maria said, her voice tinged with awe. "It's like the virus is enhancing them somehow." Next, they turned their attention to the insects. A group of fruit flies buzzed around their container, seemingly unaffected at first. But by midday, something remarkable happened. The flies started behaving differently. They moved in synchronized patterns, almost as if they were communicating. When Maria examined them under the microscope, she noticed their brains had grown larger, more complex. "It's like they're getting smarter," she whispered. The real surprise came when they tested Erebus 7 on a small mammal, a mouse. At first, the creature showed no visible changes, but over the next few days, its fur darkened and its eyes took on an unnatural shine. It became faster, stronger, and far more alert than any ordinary mouse. One evening, Jacob watched as it solved a maze in record time, something it had failed to do before exposure to the virus. "This is incredible," he said, shaking his head, "but also terrifying." Despite these dramatic results, the most puzzling reactions came from human tissue cultures. Jacob and Maria decided to test Erebus 7 on samples of human cells, expecting similar transformations. To their astonishment, nothing outwardly changed. The cells appeared completely normal under the microscope. However, further analysis revealed something extraordinary. The virus had integrated itself into the DNA without causing harm. It was as though Erebus 7 had become a permanent part of the genetic code. "This doesn't make sense," Maria muttered, staring at the data. "Why would it behave so differently in humans? Everything else reacts violently or transforms, but us, we absorb it like it's nothing." Jacob frowned, rubbing his temples. "Maybe it's because we're more complex, or maybe it's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Maria asked, her voice rising slightly. "I don't know," Jacob admitted, "but I don't think we should jump into human trials just yet. Not until we understand what this thing is really doing." As the days passed, the team debated whether to escalate their experiments. Some argued that Erebus 7 could revolutionize medicine, while others warned of unforeseen consequences. Meanwhile, the transformed organisms in the lab continued to evolve in unpredictable ways. The plants grew even larger, their glowing veins bright enough to light up the room. The fruit flies now formed intricate formations in the air, resembling constellations. And the mouse had developed abilities that bordered on unnatural. It could leap incredible distances and seemed to anticipate movement before it happened. Despite their excitement, Jacob and Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something far bigger than they could comprehend. Erebus 7 was rewriting the rules of biology, but they had no idea where it would lead, or what it truly wanted. A fierce storm rolled in overnight, blanketing the research lab with howling winds and sheets of snow. The power flickered for hours before finally giving out completely, plunging the facility into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in, but they were old and unreliable, struggling to keep up with the demand. Alarms blared as containment systems failed one by one, their fail-safes rendered useless without electricity. Jacob cursed under his breath as he rushed through the dimly lit halls, flashlight in hand. He had been monitoring the transformed organisms when the blackout hit. Now, chaos reigned. The plants, glowing unnaturally bright, illuminated sections of the lab like eerie lanterns. Their roots had burst through their containers, spreading rapidly across the floor. Insects buzzed erratically, freed from their enclosures, while the mouse darted past him in a blur, its movements too fast to follow. Maria met him near the main lab, her face pale with panic. "The locks on the animal cages are down," she said quickly. "Some of them have already escaped." "How many?" Jacob asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "All of them," Maria replied grimly. "We need to contain this before it gets worse." But it was already too late. Outside, the storm raged on, masking the sounds of creatures fleeing into the wilderness. Birds with shimmering feathers took flight, disappearing into the night sky. Squirrels with elongated claws scurried into the forest, their eyes gleaming like polished stones. Even the mouse, now impossibly agile, slipped out through a cracked window, leaving behind only faint traces of its presence. Over the next few weeks, reports began flooding in from nearby towns. People spoke of strange animals behaving unlike anything they'd ever seen. Deer with antlers that glowed faintly in the dark roamed the woods. Packs of wolves moved with unnatural coordination, their howls echoing in eerie harmony. Fishermen described catching fish that could breathe air, flopping onto land, and wriggling back into rivers. Panic spread as rumors of mutant wildlife reached urban areas. Back at the lab, Jacob and Maria worked tirelessly to assess the damage. They knew Erebus 7 was out there now, spreading unchecked. But what worried them most was the lack of human cases. Despite widespread exposure to infected animals, no one reported symptoms, at least not yet. Blood samples sent from hospitals showed traces of Erebus 7 in people who had come into contact with the transformed creatures. But nothing outwardly changed. It was as if the virus had vanished inside them, lying dormant or integrating silently. "This shouldn't be possible," Maria muttered, staring at a blood sample under the microscope. "Every other species reacts violently to Erebus 7. Why are we different?" "Maybe we're not," Jacob said quietly. "Maybe we just haven't seen it yet." Their fears deepened when news broke of even stranger phenomena. Across North America, ecosystems began shifting in bizarre ways. Trees grew taller and stronger overnight, their bark shimmering with metallic hues. Rivers teemed with hybrid creatures, fish with amphibious traits, amphibians with bird-like features. Entire swaths of land seemed to pulse with life, as though the earth itself had awakened. Public fear escalated as governments scrambled to respond. Military units were deployed to track down escaped animals, but the creatures proved elusive, adapting faster than anyone could predict. Scientists debated whether Erebus 7 was a force of destruction or creation, its purpose unclear. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens whispered about the end of the world, or the beginning of something entirely new. Jacob and Maria felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on them. They had unleashed Erebus 7, however unintentionally, and now it was reshaping the planet in ways they couldn't control. As they sat together in the quiet of the lab, surrounded by glowing plants and buzzing insects, they wondered if humanity would survive what came next, or if it even deserved to. Months passed, and the world began to change in ways no one could have predicted. While governments and scientists focused on the transformed ecosystems, a quieter evolution was taking place among humans. Ryan, an epidemiologist working for the Centers for Disease Control, noticed something unusual during routine screenings. Blood tests from individuals who had come into contact with infected animals showed traces of Erebus 7. But instead of causing illness or visible mutations, the virus seemed to integrate seamlessly into their DNA. At first, Ryan thought it might be a lab error. He ran the tests again and again, but the results were consistent. The virus wasn't attacking human cells. It was becoming part of them. This silent integration puzzled him. Unlike plants, insects, and animals that exhibited dramatic changes after exposure, humans appeared entirely unaffected, at least on the surface. But as weeks turned into months, subtle differences began to emerge. One of the first cases involved Emily, a young woman from Oregon who had been bitten by a glowing deer while hiking. She reported strange sensations at night. Her vision sharpened, allowing her to see vivid colors even in near total darkness. At first, she dismissed it as stress or exhaustion, but when she mentioned it during a follow-up appointment, Ryan grew curious. He examined her eyes under specialized equipment and found they had developed microscopic structures unlike anything seen in normal human anatomy. Her retinas now contained additional light-sensitive cells, granting her enhanced night vision. Another case caught Ryan's attention, a construction worker named Nathan. After being scratched by a mutated raccoon, he experienced heightened reflexes. One day, while working on a high-rise building, a steel beam came loose and fell toward him. Without thinking, Nathan leaped out of the way just in time. His coworkers called it a miracle, but Nathan swore he hadn't acted consciously. He simply knew where to move before the beam hit. When Ryan studied his brain activity, he discovered increased neural connections in areas associated with coordination and reaction times. These weren't isolated incidents. Across the country, similar reports trickled in. A musician claimed he could hear sounds beyond the range of normal human hearing. A teacher described feeling emotions so intensely that she could sense tension in her students before they spoke. Each story pointed to one undeniable truth. Erebus 7 was altering humans, but its effects were unpredictable and deeply personal. Ryan shared his findings with colleagues, sparking heated debates within the scientific community. Some argued that the changes were harmless, perhaps even beneficial. Others warned of potential dangers, pointing out that they didn't fully understand what the virus was doing. Could these abilities grow stronger over time? Would there be unforeseen consequences? The public remained largely unaware of these developments. Governments kept the information classified, fearing mass panic if people realized Erebus 7 was rewriting their genetic code. But whispers spread among those affected. Online forums popped up, where individuals shared their experiences in secret. They called themselves carriers, united by their connection to the virus. For Ryan, the situation raised profound questions. Was Erebus 7 a threat or a gift? Its ability to enhance human biology hinted at untapped potential, but its unpredictability made it dangerous. As he pored over data late one night, staring at charts and graphs, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that humanity stood on the brink of something monumental. The virus wasn't just changing bodies, it was reshaping lives, forcing people to confront what it meant to be human. And yet, despite all the evidence, Ryan couldn't ignore the nagging doubt in the back of his mind. If Erebus 7 was truly integrating into human DNA, why hadn't everyone been affected equally? Why were some people unchanged, while others gained extraordinary abilities? The answers eluded him, buried beneath layers of mystery. All he knew for certain was that the world would never be the same, and neither would those touched by Erebus 7. As news of the transformed ecosystem spread, so did rumors about humans who had been exposed to Erebus 7. At first, these stories were dismissed as exaggerations or hoaxes. But when videos began surfacing online, showing people performing feats beyond normal human capability, the world took notice. A young man named Adam, who could lift a car with ease, became an overnight sensation. Another video showed a woman named Claire running faster than any athlete on record, her movements almost too quick for the camera to capture. Public reaction was mixed. Some viewed these individuals as marvels of nature, proof that humanity was evolving into something greater. Others saw them as threats, fearing what they might do with their newfound powers. The term carriers stuck, and it carried both awe and suspicion. Those unaffected by Erebus 7 started calling themselves pures, drawing a line between those who had changed and those who hadn't. Tensions escalated quickly. Protests erupted in cities around the globe, with crowds demanding answers from governments. Signs reading "Protect us from mutants" clashed with others, declaring, "We are all human." In some places, violence broke out. Carriers were attacked on the streets, accused of being dangerous experiments gone wrong. Families were torn apart as neighbors turned against one another, unsure who could be trusted. Amid the chaos, underground communities began forming. People like Adam and Claire sought refuge together, finding safety in numbers. These groups weren't just hiding, they were organizing. Many believed that society would never accept them, not unless they fought for recognition and equality. Underground leaders emerged, rallying others to embrace their transformations as gifts rather than curses. Adam, charismatic and confident, became one of the most prominent voices. He argued that carriers represented the next step in human evolution and deserved respect, not fear. Governments struggled to respond. Some countries declared martial law, imposing curfews and restricting movement in an attempt to maintain order. Others tried to negotiate, offering incentives for carriers to register with authorities. But many refused, unwilling to risk imprisonment or worse. Military units were deployed to monitor outbreaks of unrest, but their presence only fueled resentment. Protesters chanted slogans like "Freedom for the Change" and "No More Division." Scientists continued studying Erebus 7, hoping to find a way to stabilize its effects or even reverse them. Ryan worked tirelessly, analyzing data from both carriers and Pures. He believed understanding the virus was key to bridging the growing divide. But progress was slow, and pressure mounted as politicians demanded solutions. General Harris, head of a covert military operation, pushed for aggressive measures. He wanted to capture powerful carriers and study their abilities, convinced they could be weaponized. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens found themselves caught in the middle. Laura, one of the original researchers who discovered Erebus 7, watched the unfolding crisis with guilt weighing heavily on her shoulders. She gave interviews, urging calm and explaining that the virus wasn't inherently harmful. Her words fell on deaf ears. Many blamed her and her team for releasing Erebus 7 into the world. In schools, playgrounds, and workplaces, divisions deepened. Children whispered about classmates whose eyes glowed faintly in the dark, or who ran faster than anyone else during gym class. Parents debated whether to send their kids to school if there were known carriers attending. Fear spread faster than facts, clouding judgment and fueling hatred. Yet amid the turmoil, moments of hope emerge. A carrier named Sarai used her enhanced strength to rescue victims trapped under rubble after an earthquake. Another, Daniel, whose heightened senses allowed him to detect danger, helped prevent a major train accident. Stories like these reminded people that carriers weren't monsters. They were still human, capable of kindness and heroism. The world stood at a crossroads, grappling with questions it had never faced before. Could humanity adapt to this new reality, or would fear and mistrust drive it toward collapse? For now, the answer remained uncertain, hanging precariously in the balance. Behind closed doors, governments and powerful organizations began making decisions that would shape the future of humanity. General Harris, a stern man with sharp eyes and a reputation for ruthless efficiency, called an emergency meeting at a secure military base. Around the table sat scientists, politicians, and strategists, all discussing the growing crisis caused by Erebus 7. The conversation was tense, voices rising as opinions clashed. "We can't let this situation spiral out of control," General Harris said firmly, slamming his fist on the table. "These carriers are unpredictable. Some of them have abilities we can't even comprehend. If we don't act now, they could become a threat to national security." One of the scientists, Dr. Olivia Carter, frowned deeply. A quiet but determined woman in her late 30s, she had spent years studying genetic anomalies. "We don't know enough about Erebus 7 yet," she argued. "Yes, some carriers have developed extraordinary abilities, but most are just trying to live their lives. Treating them like enemies will only make things worse." Harris ignored her, turning instead to a group of military advisors. "We need to identify the strongest carriers and bring them in for testing. If we can understand how their powers work, we can replicate them, weaponize them. This isn't just about containment anymore. It's about staying ahead of the curve." Olivia clenched her fists under the table, anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. She knew what Harris was suggesting went far beyond ethics. Capturing carriers and experimenting on them wasn't just cruel, it risked escalating tensions further. But before she could protest again, another voice spoke up. "What if we're looking at this the wrong way?" asked Senator Lewis, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a thoughtful expression. "Instead of seeing carriers as threats, maybe we should focus on finding ways to stabilize the virus. If we can control its effects, we might prevent more transformations altogether." The room fell silent as everyone considered the idea. Harris finally broke the silence, his tone measured but firm. "That's a long-term solution. Right now, we need immediate action. We'll move forward with both approaches, containment and research. But let's be clear, carriers who resist cooperation will be treated as hostile." As the meeting adjourned, Olivia lingered behind, her mind racing. She couldn't stand by while people were hunted down like animals. That night, she made a decision. Using her access to classified data, she began gathering information about Erebus 7 and the military's plans. Her goal was simple: to find a way to protect carriers and uncover the truth about the virus. Meanwhile, underground communities continued to grow. Adam, now a symbol of resistance, rallied others to stand against oppression. He believed hiding wasn't enough. They needed to fight back. His speeches inspired many, but not everyone agreed with his methods. Some carriers, like Claire, preferred diplomacy, hoping to negotiate peace with world leaders. Tensions reached a boiling point when soldiers raided a safe house in Chicago. Dozens of carriers were arrested, their hands bound with special restraints designed to suppress their powers. News of the raid spread quickly, sparking outrage. Protests erupted in cities worldwide, with thousands chanting slogans like "Freedom for All" and "No More Fear." Videos of the raid showed soldiers using excessive force, further fueling public anger. In response, governments tightened their grip. Curfews were enforced, and surveillance increased. Military checkpoints appeared on roads, searching for anyone suspected of being a carrier. Families lived in constant fear of being targeted, whether they were affected by Erebus 7 or not. Amid the chaos, Ryan worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between science and society. He gave interviews, explaining that carriers weren't dangerous by nature. Erebus 7 is rewriting our biology, he said during one televised appearance. But that doesn't mean it's evil. Humanity has faced challenges like this before. We've adapted, survived, and thrived. We can do it again. His words resonated with some, but distrust ran deep. As the divide between carriers and purers widened, the question remained: could humanity find a way to coexist, or would fear drive it toward destruction? For now, the battle lines were drawn, and neither side seemed willing to back down. The world was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. In the forests, fields, and rivers, the transformed ecosystems fought back against human interference. Packs of wolves with glowing eyes stalked through towns at night, their movements eerily coordinated. Birds with shimmering feathers disrupted air traffic, their flocks forming patterns that blocked runways and forced planes to divert. Fishermen reported pulling up nets filled with hybrid creatures, part fish, part amphibian, that thrashed violently before slipping back into the water. Amid the chaos, Ryan began to piece together a theory. He spent long hours in his lab, surrounded by maps, charts, and data collected from across the globe. The transformations caused by Erebus 7 weren't random. They'd followed a pattern. Plants grew stronger where pollution had once been worst. Animals adapted to reclaim territories lost to urban sprawl. It was as if the virus wasn't just rewriting biology. It was restoring balance to the planet. "This isn't about us," Ryan muttered one evening, staring at a map marked with red dots showing areas of intense transformation. Erebus 7 isn't attacking humanity. It's trying to fix what we've broken. Laura, who had joined him in Colorado after leaving Alaska, nodded slowly. She had seen the same patterns but hadn't dared to voice her thoughts. "If that's true," she said quietly, "then we're standing in its way. Every time we try to control it or fight it, we're making things worse." Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. The problem is, no one wants to hear that. People are scared. They see these changes as threats, not as part of something bigger. As they spoke, reports came in of another incident, a massive creature spotted near the edge of a national park. Descriptions varied, but witnesses agreed on one thing: it was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Part bear, part tree, its body seemed to shift and grow as it moved, roots sprouting from its fur and leaves rustling where skin should have been. Military units were dispatched to investigate, but the creature vanished into the wilderness before they arrived. What remained were claw marks deep enough to split boulders and trees bent as though crushed by an invisible force. Scientists debated whether it was a single mutation or the result of multiple species merging under Erebus 7's influence. The incident sparked panic among nearby residents, many of whom demanded evacuation. But for some, the appearance of such a creature was awe-inspiring rather than terrifying. Online forums buzzed with theories, some suggesting that Erebus 7 was creating guardians, beings designed to protect the natural world from further harm. Meanwhile, underground communities of carriers faced new challenges. Soldiers continued raiding safe houses, arresting anyone suspected of harboring fugitives. Adam led a group that retaliated, using their powers to sabotage military operations. Their actions drew both admiration and criticism. While some saw them as heroes fighting for justice, others feared they were escalating tensions even further. Claire tried to mediate, urging Adam to focus on peaceful solutions. "We can't win this by force," she argued one night after a raid left several soldiers injured. "Every time we fight back, they use it as an excuse to tighten their grip. We need to show the world we're not monsters." Adam shook his head, his jaw tight with determination. "They'll never listen unless we make them. Humanity has always feared what it doesn't understand. Maybe it's time we gave them something real to fear." Olivia, working independently, made a breakthrough. Hidden away in a makeshift lab, she discovered fragments of Erebus 7's genetic code that suggested it was self-regulating. The virus didn't spread indiscriminately. It adapted based on environmental needs. If she could isolate those mechanisms, she might find a way to stabilize its effects without erasing them entirely. Her discovery gave her hope, but time was running out. Governments prepared drastic measures, including plans to cull infected animals and quarantine entire regions. As humanity teetered on the edge of collapse, the question remained: would they choose coexistence or destruction? World leaders gathered in a secure underground facility to address the escalating crisis. The room was tense, filled with representatives from every corner of the globe. On one side of the table sat military advisors and politicians advocating for drastic measures. On the other were scientists like Ryan and Olivia, urging caution and cooperation. The debate stretched late into the night, voices rising as each faction argued its case. "We can't keep ignoring the facts," General Harris said, his tone sharp and unyielding. "These transformations are spreading uncontrollably. If we don't act now, humanity could face extinction." Ryan stood up, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "And what do you propose?" "Killing everything that's changed. That includes humans too. Erebus 7 is already part of us. Millions of people carry it in their DNA. Are you suggesting we wipe out our own species?" Harris glared at him, but didn't respond directly. Instead, he turned to the others. "There's only one solution: containment zones. We isolate the affected areas, cull infected animals, and monitor human populations closely. It's harsh, but it's necessary." The idea sent shockwaves through the room. Some nodded in agreement, while others recoiled in horror. Senator Lewis, who had previously advocated for diplomacy, spoke up. "Containment might slow the spread, but it won't solve the root problem. We need to find a way to live alongside these changes, to adapt, not destroy." Olivia leaned forward, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Erebus 7 isn't just a virus. It's a catalyst for balance. Everything it does serves a purpose, restoring ecosystems we've damaged for centuries. Fighting it is like trying to hold back the tide. Instead, we should focus on understanding it and finding ways to coexist." Her words resonated with some, but fear overshadowed reason for many. After hours of heated discussion, a compromise was reached, temporarily. Containment efforts would begin, but funding would also be allocated to research aimed at stabilizing Erebus 7's effects. It was an uneasy truce, born out of desperation rather than trust. Outside the meeting, protests continued to grow. Ordinary citizens took to the streets, demanding answers and action. Carriers and Pures marched together in some cities, united by their shared desire for peace. In others, violence erupted as mistrust boiled over. Buildings burned, and clashes between soldiers and civilians became commonplace. Amid the chaos, stories of hope emerge. Underground communities opened their doors to those in need, offering shelter and support regardless of whether they were carriers or pures. Adam and Claire worked tirelessly to bridge divides, organizing events where people could come together and share their experiences. Slowly, small pockets of harmony began to form. In the wilderness, the transformed ecosystems thrived. Massive hybrid creatures roamed freely, protecting the land from further destruction. Farmers reported strange yet beneficial changes. Crops grew faster and stronger, requiring less water and fertilizer. Even polluted rivers began to clear, teeming with life once more. But not everyone saw these changes as positive. Corporations dependent on resource extraction pushed back, lobbying governments to prioritize economic interests over environmental recovery. Their efforts sparked outrage among activists, leading to widespread boycotts and strikes. As months passed, the world remained divided, caught between fear and hope. For every step forward, there seemed to be 2 steps back. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, something remarkable began to take shape. Children born during this time showed no signs of hostility toward carriers or the transformed world around them. They adapted naturally, embracing both the old and the new. Ryan often thought about these children as he worked late into the night. To him, they represented humanity's best chance for survival, a generation unburdened by prejudice, capable of seeing the beauty in change. As he stared out the window at the glowing forest beyond, he allowed himself a small flicker of optimism. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could rise to meet the challenge. For now, the planet pulsed with life, rebalancing itself in ways no one could have predicted. Whether humanity chose to join this new harmony or resist it remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: Earth had begun to heal, and it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. Years passed, and the world slowly found its footing in the wake of Erebus 7's transformations. Cities began to adapt, blending modern structures with untamed wilderness. Towering skyscrapers were draped in vines that glowed faintly at night, while parks became home to hybrid creatures that wandered freely among humans. Streets once filled with cars now hosted pedestrians and cyclists, as ecosystems reclaimed space, once dominated by concrete and steel. In some places, walls still stood, barriers separating containment zones from the rest of society. But even these areas showed signs of change. Inside, communities thrived despite the challenges, finding ways to coexist with the transformed environment. Outside, governments worked to dismantle the barriers, realizing they had been built out of fear rather than necessity. The divide between carriers and pures began to fade as people focused on survival and rebuilding. Adam and Claire played key roles in this transition. Adam, who had once advocated for resistance, shifted his focus to education. He traveled across the globe, speaking to crowds about the importance of acceptance and understanding. "We're all part of something bigger now," he often said. Erebus 7 didn't choose sides. It changed us all. The question is, what kind of future do we want to build? Claire, meanwhile, dedicated herself to healing wounds left by years of conflict. She founded centers where carriers and pures could come together to share stories, learn from one another, and find common ground. Her efforts inspired others to follow suit, creating networks of support that spanned continents. Scientists like Ryan and Olivia continued their research, uncovering new insights into Erebus 7's behavior. They discovered that the virus wasn't static. It evolved alongside its hosts, adapting to meet the needs of both individuals and ecosystems. This revelation helped ease fears, proving that Erebus 7 wasn't a mindless force of destruction, but a dynamic agent of balance. Governments, too, adapted. Policies shifted from containment and control to collaboration and coexistence. International agreements were signed, pledging resources to protect transformed habitats and support affected populations. Military units once tasked with hunting down carriers were reassigned to environmental conservation efforts, working alongside activists to restore damaged lands. Children born during this era grew up without the prejudices of the past. To them, glowing trees and intelligent animals were simply part of life. Schools taught lessons about adaptation and resilience, emphasizing humanity's role as stewards of the planet rather than its rulers. These young minds embraced the changes, seeing opportunity where previous generations saw only danger. Yet challenges remained. Some regions struggled to recover, burdened by decades of neglect and exploitation. Others resisted change entirely, clinging to outdated beliefs and practices. Conflicts flared occasionally, reminders of how fragile peace could be. But for every setback, there were victories. Communities coming together, innovations improving lives, and moments of connection bridging old divides. One such moment occurred in Alaska, near the site where Erebus 7 had first been discovered. A young girl named Lily wandered through the icy wilderness, her breath visible in the crisp air. She stumbled upon remnants of the ancient ice core that had contained the virus, its surface cracked and weathered. As she touched it, she felt a strange warmth, as though the earth itself were alive beneath her fingertips. Lily didn't understand what she had found, or what it meant, but deep down, she sensed that Erebus 7 was more than just a virus. It was a chapter in Earth's story, one that humanity had only begun to read. And as she stood there, surrounded by towering glaciers and glowing moss, she realized that the planet still held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Back in Colorado, Ryan reflected on how far they had come. The journey had been painful, marked by loss and uncertainty, but it had also been transformative, forcing humanity to confront its flaws and strive for something greater. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but he believed they were moving in the right direction. As the sun set over a world reborn, hope flickered like the glow of bioluminescent plants scattered across the landscape. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Decades later, Earth had transformed into a world unlike anything humanity had ever known. Cities blended seamlessly with nature, their skylines softened by cascading vines and glowing plants. Rivers flowed clean again, teeming with hybrid creatures that seemed to thrive in harmony with humans. The air smelled fresher, the forests thicker, and the nights brighter thanks to the faint luminescence of Erebus 7's touch. The divide between carriers and purers had all but disappeared. People no longer feared those who carried the virus within them. Instead, they celebrated the diversity it brought. Some carriers used their abilities to help others, healing wounds, predicting natural disasters, or communicating with transformed animals. Others simply lived ordinary lives, their powers subtle enough to go unnoticed. What mattered most was that everyone, regardless of their connection to Erebus 7, was seen as part of the same fragile yet resilient whole. In schools, children learned about the virus not as a threat, but as a turning point in history. Textbooks told the story of how humanity had faced its greatest challenge and emerged stronger for it. Teachers emphasized lessons of adaptability, cooperation, and respect for the natural world. Field trips often took students into the wilderness, where they could witness firsthand the beauty of ecosystems reborn. Lily, now grown, became one of the leading voices in this new era. After discovering the remnants of the ancient ice core as a child, she dedicated her life to studying Erebus 7. Her work revealed that the virus wasn't just a biological phenomenon. It was part of a larger cycle, one that had likely occurred before in Earth's distant past. She believed Erebus 7 acted as a reset button, triggered when the planet's balance tipped too far out of alignment. "We're not special," Lily often said during lectures. "Erebus 7 didn't choose us because we're better or worse than any other species. It chose us because we needed to change. And if we don't keep learning from this experience, it might happen again." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring people to stay vigilant. Governments established global councils focused on sustainability, ensuring that humanity wouldn't repeat the mistakes of the past. Corporations embraced green technologies, driven by public demand for ethical practices. Even industries once reliant on resource extraction found new ways to thrive, investing in renewable energy and conservation efforts. Yet, despite these strides, questions lingered. Why had Erebus 7 integrated so differently into human DNA compared to other species? Was it truly finished reshaping the planet, or was it merely pausing before the next phase? These mysteries kept scientists like Ryan and Olivia working tirelessly, even in their old age. They knew answers might never come fully, but the search itself kept humanity humble and curious. One day, while exploring an untouched corner of Alaska, Lily came across a patch of moss glowing brighter than anything she'd ever seen. Kneeling beside it, she felt the same warmth she'd experienced as a child. This time, however, she noticed something unusual, a faint pulse beneath the surface, almost like a heartbeat. It reminded her of the ice core fragment she'd found years ago, only alive in a way she couldn't explain. As she sat there, surrounded by silence broken only by the wind, Lily realized that Erebus 7's story wasn't over. Perhaps it never would be. The virus, or whatever force lay behind it, wasn't just rewriting biology. It was guiding evolution, nudging life toward harmony in ways science couldn't yet comprehend. Back home, Lily shared her discovery with colleagues, sparking renewed interest in Erebus 7's origins. But privately, she wondered if understanding every detail was truly necessary. Maybe some things were meant to remain mysterious, reminders of how small humanity was in the grand scheme of existence. Underneath a sky dotted with stars, Earth continued to heal, grow, and evolve. Humanity had learned to live alongside its transformations, embracing both the challenges and wonders they brought. Though the future remained uncertain, one truth stood clear. The planet had given them a second chance, and this time, they were determined to get it right. And somewhere deep in the frozen wilderness, hidden beneath layers of ice and time, another secret waited patiently, for the moment when Earth would need it most.